Alright, so you're well aware of the Eagles' questions and concerns and potential areas of weakness at this point. However, when it comes to the rest of the NFC East, there's a lot more areas to exploit them than there are reasons to be worried about Philly. In this video, I'll take a look around the rest of the division to see just how the Birds stack up and talk about why it could literally be the best case scenario for the Eagles. Plus, we get a really promising injury update on Nolan Smith and Nakobe Dean, so let's get into it. But first, let's run it. What's up, guys? So with everyone on break and training camp still about a month away, I figured it was time to check in on the NFC East and see how those teams are doing. Because all this outside noise and doubt from the national media regarding Philly's chances to repeat as NFC champs has gotten a little bit out there. I mean, sure, the Eagles have a couple question marks, but nothing quite as glaring as the rest of the teams in the division. Take Dallas, for instance, who still need to work a deal with the best player on their team in Micah Parsons. Yet while that's the main contract to get done this season, it's even more difficult the following year, since cornerback Deron Bland will need a new deal in 2026, and most likely O-lineman Tyler Smith is going to have to get something done as well. By the way, rough estimate on the math there, but both guys are going to be looking at something around $20 million, maybe even a little bit more than that per year. So needless to say, Jerry's got a lot to worry about, and he's also got George Pickens now too, so that's a lot to try and manage.
I want our fans to know that I can manage really good. I do real well managing.
You actually believe that?
It's amazing because 88% of Dallas fans just recently voted for a B grade or higher when it comes to the new coaching hire of Brian Schottenheimer. Which on one hand, I'm not going to knock Schottenheimer's message of building culture and camaraderie around the team while also holding players accountable. Yeah, for Jerry Jones to publicly admit Brian is known as a career assistant, but he ain't Brian no more, and that coming after Schottenheimer saying even he was just as surprised as everyone else when he was named the head coach, it's hilarious to see the Dallas delusion coming full circle.
Do you ever have deja vu, Mrs. Lancaster?
For real, it's been 30 years or 10,750 days since Dallas has made it to a conference championship. And let's just say the move to Schottenheimer should be great news for Eagles fans. Heck, in his 14 years of NFL experience as an offensive coordinator, he's never really had that great of an offense. Like Jimmy Kimsky pointed out back with the Jets when he was there, the defense was good, but the offense seemed to always hold them back. Or when Schottenheimer was with the Rams in St. Louis, his teams actually never cracked the top 20 in yards or points. Although the worst of all might be the lone season as Georgia's offensive coordinator in 2015, since Schottenheimer managed to rank second to last over the previous 12 seasons in terms of points per game.
Was he that bad?
Yeah, there's a reason why only 3 teams have worse odds when it comes to winning the Super Bowl out of the NFC. And that being the New Orleans Saints, the Carolina Panthers, and at 20,000 to 1, the New York Giants. And to think, back in February, they had all the national media trying to pump the Cowboys hype train for just how close they were to turning this whole thing around.
I think they have Super Bowl caliber players, but they are a running back, a defensive tackle, healthy linebacker play, an additional offensive lineman, and a number 2 wide receiver, I think, away from the Super Bowl.
Okay, look, they did have a positive draft, but still, you could argue that since that time, they've just gotten a little bit worse. Think about it. All-pro right guard Zack Martin retired, Dallas let slot corner Jordan Lewis walk, and the same for edge Chauncey Golston, plus they even let their lead back from last season go in Rico Dowdle. So you can't blame defensive end DeMarcus Lawrence for speaking the truth once he signed with Seattle and left Dallas.
You know, Dallas is my home. I made my home there. You know, my family lives there. You know, I'm forever going to be there, but, you know, I know for sure I'm not going to win a Super Bowl there.
I want our fans to know that I can manage really good. I do real well managing.
What the hell are you talking about? Who are you talking to?
I'm not exaggerating here. The Cowboys have one of the worst tackle tandems in the NFL. And Jimmy Kimsky would say for sure in the NFC. Since at right tackle, Terrence Steele has been a below-average starter, allowing 17 sacks over the last 2 seasons. And then at left tackle, Tyler Guyton finished second in the NFL with 18 penalties last season. Oh yeah, along with 6 sacks while getting benched multiple times for his inconsistency and poor play. I could just go on and on. The run game is not near as good. Miles Sanders, Javonte Williams, 3.6 yards per carry average between both of them, a new run game to come in, and the run defense is probably going to be even worse. Now, to be fair, back to the acquisition of Pickens, on paper, he without question makes Dallas better, but that's on paper. The issue is the real-world application of temper tantrums, emotions, and flat-out immaturity getting the better of him, like when the 24-year-old bailed on his sold-out youth football camp at Highmark Stadium. For the record, that was after he got traded to Dallas and still committed to attending the camp. However, just 3 days before the event, believe it or not, Pickens backed out and left the camp in a bind. Now, thankfully for the kids, Steelers tight end Pat Freiermuth is a real one, stepped in so that they could keep the camp going, and no worries there. So first off, kudos to Pat for being a great role model, but then secondly, it's kind of par for the course with the decision-making for Pickens. Ultimately, I'm just waiting for an internal implosion because all the pieces are there once Dallas experiences some adversity.
And here we go.
Honestly, as bad as that is, the ultimate clown show is the New York Giants. Because somehow head coach Brian Daboll and general manager Joe Schoen still have jobs, despite a 3-14 record with a negative 142-point differential. Obviously, fresh off the heels of letting Saquon Barkley go and help win a championship for a division rival and letting several other talented players walk, which naturally left owner John Mara beside himself.
How long will it take to improve the product, John?
It better not take too long, Bruce, because I've just about run out of patience.
Look, I'm not going to deep dive on the Giants because they're a dumpster fire, and also Mara could have chose to just move on with Schoen and Daboll, yet he decided to keep them here, so he's part of the problem. Yet when you realize out of every team in the NFL, the one with the most returning starters from a season ago is the New York Giants, it's amazing how Joe Schoen is still employed.
I knew exactly what to do, but in a much more real sense, I had no idea what to do.
You think? I mean, Schoen paid Darius Slayton, wide receiver Darius Slayton, more money, or the money that he was not willing to pay Saquon Barkley. And no offense to Slayton, but come on. So while Philly is wondering who's going to win out at safety, the Giants have all kinds of questions and concerns. Not to mention the fact that they have the hardest schedule in the league this season. Again, not really a shock by all of this, but now at this point, it's really just a question of when, not if, the Giants will have a new vacancy at head coach. However, the biggest threat in the division, most people would argue at least, is the Washington Commanders. After all, they won 12 games last season, made it to the NFC Championship game, although the Philly voice did make a good case for some potential regression coming their way. Since dating back to 1978, teams that improved their record by 8 or more wins the previous season ended up averaging nearly 4 fewer wins the following year. I mean, I don't know if you want to buy into Jimmy Kempski's lucky Commanders theory, but there's a pretty good reason that the Commanders' win total is currently set for 9.5 wins. Either way, one thing's for certain, Washington's paying a whole lot of money for a lot of aging vets. Granted, Howie Roseman's gotten into trouble for doing that in the past, but he's even said previously that we needed to get younger and he's learned from it. Yet for the Commies, they're paying cornerback Marshawn Lattimore $18 million, and I don't think we've seen he can play worth much of anything at this point in his career. And then there's Deebo Samuel, who's clearly not been a team player and has to be one of the slower receivers in the league by now. Of course, I should say adding left tackle Laramie Tunsil from Houston was a positive move in terms of player, but they did have to give up a lot to get him in a 2nd, 3rd, and 7th round pick. Once again, though, out of all the moves they made, Jimmy Kempski reminded just how crazy it was to offer Javon Kinlaw $45 million for 3 years, especially for a team that has such a big struggle stopping the running game. I mean, come on, I don't have to tell you, I could just show you how miserable his run defense is. Plus, in 5 seasons, Kinlaw has just 9.5 career sacks. So it begs the question, what kind of value does he actually add?
What would you say you do here?
Somehow this dude took a 1-year deal, a prove-it deal, a 1-year deal for $8 million with the Jets last year, did nothing, and then the Commanders went up there and said, yeah, you know what, we're going to offer you $45 million for 3 years. Which again, considering the Commies were 3rd worst in the league last year at stopping the run, and the only team to give up over 130 yards rushing per game and still have a winning record, tells you all you need to know. Having said that, Washington can still make plays and can still be dangerous thanks to the play from Jaden Daniels. But it's also important to note that this is a team that is vastly on the downhill slide, or at least over the hill in terms of age, because they have 30 players who are at least 29 years old or older. By the way, for comparison, the Eagles roster only has 8 of those players at 29 or older. Like I say, even if their offense is good, the pass defense and run defense aren't locks at all to improve, let alone hold serve. Granted, there's some poking fun here, but at the same time, I'm just taking a look at this and saying, there's not a reason why, or you can't give a great reason why the Eagles can't run this thing back and win the NFC East. You take a look at the teams across the board, it just makes a whole lot of sense, but I'm curious. You guys let me know anything I left off, other reasons why Philly may have some concern, and really, in particular, like what it has to do with the NFC East rivals. So let me know that in the comments, and FYI, just by liking and commenting in this video, I'll give you another chance to win a signed Brandon Graham Super Bowl jersey, which I'll be giving away on the Tuesday night live stream. Anyway, while you're doing that and commenting on the video, I did want to mention Nolan Smith and Jalyx Hunt attending the SAC Summit in Las Vegas to get tips and pointers from guys like Max Crosby, Von Miller, and Cam Jordan. Because as we've said, it's going to take a lot to replace some of the losses and snap counts on the defensive line from last year. But come on, these dudes are locked in and clearly leaving no stone unturned when it comes to getting better.
To see the agility of Nolan Smith right here. Spin. Drop. Ice pick, no. There we go, nice.
By the way, notice that Nolan looks pretty good and is striking the bag. He also said that he expects to be 100% by training camp, which is fantastic news for the triceps injury. Not a huge surprise there, but still positive news all around. And on that note, Nakobe Dean also posted to his Instagram with some of the rehab he's still attacking, so promising signs from him as well. Anyway, given the positivity and other Eagles updates, I had to get Eagles writer Anthony DiBona on to share his thoughts and discuss all the latest news around the Birds.
Super Bowl hangover, do you buy into that notion a little bit? Is there reasons why this team could be different or, I don't know, be able to kind of fight that trend of a Super Bowl hangover?
Well, firstly, it's kind of funny to see so many people questioning if the Eagles can do it because we're literally coming off the Chiefs going to the Super Bowl 3 years in a row, winning 2 out of the 3. And you never really – I felt like nobody was ever kind of questioning them. It was kind of like who was going to be the NFC team because they were going to run through the AFC. That's what it kind of felt like every year. But, I mean, with the Eagles, I know the last time they made the Super Bowl, they lost. And then the following season, things were rough. But a lot of that, I think, had to do with the coaching staff and just the situation there. They lost both coordinators. They lost their linebacker coach, their defensive back coach. They were forced, because it was so late in like the hiring cycle and the offseason, that they were forced to just either hire these inexperienced college coaches or just promote guys from within that maybe like weren't ready for those positions that they were like promoted to. But this time around, they lost Kellen Moore, the offensive coordinator. They lost Doug Nussmeier, the quarterback coach, Kyle Valero, TJ Pagnetti. I mean, with Kellen Moore, Nussmeier, and Valero, they all came there together from the Chargers. So there really wasn't like too much of a loss there. They were there for one season, but it's not like they had these lengthy tenures in Philadelphia where all these players and coaches got along with them and got familiarized with them and just became used to them being in the building. So just 1 year for them in Philadelphia, and that's it. Pagnetti was more of a fixture in Philadelphia. He survived 2 or 3 different head coaches with the Eagles, so he's been there for quite a while. So, but then again, it's not like he was a big-time position coach, more of a guy that worked with the offensive line, with the running game, things like that. So I just think overall they're in a much better situation. They didn't lose any defensive coaches, which I was surprised by. I feel like we've talked about that a bunch. Christian Parker is still around. All these guys are still around on the defensive coaching staff. And that's really where they struggled in 2023 coming off the Super Bowl, where I think this time around, and Zach Baun mentioned it, Brandon Graham mentioned it, they're kind of trending upwards, even though they played so well last season, that things are still moving in the right direction. They're expecting these leaps from all these young players. So I wouldn't be too concerned in terms of a Super Bowl hangover.
Zach Baun, like you said, miles ahead of where we were last season. Now, number 1 defense in the NFL. Are they able to repeat that? Who knows? But as of where they are right now compared to last season, miles ahead, understanding Fangio's scheme, what he's asking from them, maybe some continual progression there. But there's some excitement. I'm kind of buying into. I think a lot of people are, and as you mentioned there, Clint Hurt, Bobby King, Christian Parker, all those guys get praised for the defense. You have that solidified there, and there's some consistency, even if it's like, okay, you lost positional coaches on the offensive side of the ball. Well, you didn't lose a lot of players. There's 10 of 11 starters coming back on the offensive side. So where you may have lost players for the defensive side, you have all those positional coaches, and you have the consistency there. So I'm not worried. I mean, like a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being a freak out. It's a 1 to 2. Like there's just very little to be concerned about, I think, for this team. And with at least for those aspects of a Super Bowl hangover, how we want to paraphrase or kind of put that up there. Now, do they have a difficult schedule? Yes, we've talked about it before. You have first place schedule for a reason. They don't have a single back-to-back home game. That's kind of crazy. Lose out on a home game too with their schedule in the first place, or one more away game than a home game, and then all the primetime matchups. So they're going to get the best shot for everybody. We understand that, but I think that there's a little bit more credit to be given there. However, they have this streak, this 21-year streak that we're going on of no one repeating as champs for the NFC East. And it's crazy. You go back and look at how many times the winner of the division is the favorite the following year to win the division, and yet we're still talking about 21 years and go back to 2004 since the last time that it happened. Is this the final, or is this the first time in forever, but the final time to actually get somebody to break that streak? Do the Eagles do it? And who is the maybe most competitive team? Who's the closest challenge they're going to have to not do that?
Well, I hope so, right? It'll be great if the Eagles can be the ones to break that streak. They broke a bunch of streaks last year en route to the winning Super Bowl, so hopefully that's the case. But it feels like a lot of people are worried about the Commanders. They're the team that, like, after last season especially, they just kind of with the Texans 2 years ago where they kind of surprised everybody, made that playoff push, won a playoff game, and like people were really hyping up C.J. Stroud at that point. We're seeing the same thing with Jaden Daniels, and deservedly so. But I just don't know. I don't think it's, and I said it before last season with the Texans, I just don't, it's people just assume that these teams are just going to take that step forward. They're going to be better than they were before, but it doesn't always work like that. And especially with the Commanders, they have a lot of older players. I feel like they got pretty lucky as far as injuries go. And Jaden Daniels, now teams have more tape on him, and now teams have more tape on Cliff Kingsbury and how he utilizes Jaden Daniels. And everything in Kingsbury's past kind of says once teams have a year of film on him or so, that things start flipping around and defenses are finding out how to stop this offense. So I wouldn't be too worried about them, but I would actually be more concerned about the Dallas Cowboys. And I know if Eagles fans are not going to want to hear that. They're going to say Dallas sucks, and that's true as well. But at the same time, it's just I feel like they got the worst injury luck possible last season, and now obviously with this exercise, I'm just going to assume that everybody stays relatively healthy. I just really like what the Cowboys did in the draft as well. I mean, Tyler Booker is kind of a plug-and-play guard, like starting guard right from day one. Siobhan Rebel is a guy that I thought was really one of the more slept-on cornerbacks. I thought he could have been a first-round pick, but because of the injury, that's probably why he slipped a little bit. Donovan Ezeraku was a guy that Eagles fans were very interested in. The Eagles themselves were very interested in. He fell to the Cowboys. I mean, they added Javonte Williams and Jaden Blue in the running back room, who I think are better players than they're given credit for. Kenneth Murray at linebacker that didn't necessarily reach the potential that many thought he would with the Chargers, but in Dallas, maybe he can turn things around. And Dante Fowler Jr. is back in Dallas as well. So I just think the offseason they had, as along with obviously trading for George Pickens and getting these guys back healthy, Dak Prescott and whatnot, I just feel like they are going to be the ones to kind of push the Eagles for first place in the NFC East, if it is going to be anybody.
I don't disagree with you there, and I know that you're not saying this also, so people just refrain, because we might get some comments of it, like, what are you talking about with the Eagle or with the Cowboys, being there? But I agree with you in the sense that they're probably going to surprise some people, and that'll be the closer competition rather than the Commanders. And as you mentioned, I believe that Jaden Daniels was I think he was either like the top quarterback in terms, or maybe very close to the top quarterback in terms of like his first half of the season, how well he played compared to the second half. And you could attribute a lot of that to Cliff Kingsbury, as you're talking about, teams getting adjusted, acclimated to what he's trying to do. And they're like, oh, well, hey, maybe it's a little bit of same thing and telegraphed here, which we saw that following the 2023 season with the offense and being almost identical. So maybe that continues on to this following year. Shout out to Jimmy Kimsky, had some really great breakdowns of why various teams will have dumpster fire seasons, but he did bring up the fact that the Commanders, being a team of 8+ wins, dating all the way back to 1978, a team that has had 8+ wins from a year prior, the following year they come back and try to repeat that, they usually average 4 wins fewer. So, I mean, we say they had 12 wins last year. Based on that tradition, or that trend, they would have, like an 8-win team. And so, you're like, okay, that's probably not the top competition for the Eagles then. So it would be Dallas. But, I mean, Schottenheimer's hired as the head coach. Jerry Jones said it beforehand, even before he's like, he's a career assistant. Like, that's what he's viewed as. He's not Brian anymore. Like, those are his quotes. He literally says he's not Brian anymore. He kind of cuts the legs out from under it. Brian Schottenheimer even maybe partially joked, but even was like, I'm as surprised as you guys are to get hired here. So a little bit weird, a little bit odd. He has not had the best resume in terms of helping his team's offenses as an offensive coordinator. Now he's head coach, so maybe that helps. Maybe it's not to be in the offensive coordinator role. But there's just a lot of areas. And I know that no team is perfect. But I think that when it comes to the Eagles, sometimes if we get micro-focused on it and going like, well, the Eagles, they need a safety. Like, we're not exactly sure about the safety, but they got to figure something out there. What about cornerback 2? Will Kelee Ringo live up to the hype? Right guard, is it Tyler Steen? Can he be able to keep the job? Will he play consistent? I mean, those are valid questions, but we pause for a minute and look around the division, let alone the conference, but look around the division and go, there's a lot of bigger concerns that all those other teams are dealing with, and maybe they address them, but a lot of bigger concerns that they're dealing with that Philly, thankfully, is not, even coming off of a Super Bowl win.
Yeah, I mean, and that's just a credit to Howie Roseman, the job that he's done over the last several years, because with every situation on the roster, it feels like you mentioned the cornerback too, it's like, who's going to start there? But then again, you're like, Kelee Ringo has been brought up through the ranks for the first 2 years of his career. Now he's reaching the third year of his NFL career, and that's when he's finally going to be competing for a starting job. He's been able to bring these guys along slowly, and I know you usually see that sometimes with quarterbacks and other positions, but a lot of teams don't have the luxury of having these guys with a redshirt year. Usually that's like a college thing, but you see that with the Eagles a ton. Obviously, Nolan Smith kind of had the same situation. Jalyx Hunt for most of his rookie season was the same thing. Even Cooper DeJean, granted that was mostly because of injury, but he was also brought along slower because they had depth at cornerback and they could have different players in there for the meantime. So it's just a credit to Howie Roseman. Even Tyler Steen on the offensive line, he's played spot duty here and there, started a few games, but it's never been forced to just be thrown in there from day one and just start a full season. So the Eagles are in a great position, and I feel like you mentioned, a lot of these other teams around the NFL, they don't even know who their starting offensive line is going to be, let alone just one position. The Giants, it felt like all of last season, I spoke to my brother about it, just in the middle of training camp, they're just like, yeah, this drill, this is our starting offensive line. Oh, this drill, this is our start. It's like a couple weeks from the regular season, and you don't know who your starting offensive line is going to be. So the Eagles are in a very envious position that a lot of teams around the NFL wish they could be.
Poor John. That's all I can say. I mean, we're not going to go there, but this has to be the last ride of Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen. It just feels like, and I know Hard Knocks paints it in a different light. It paints them in a bad picture. Probably doesn't do them justice. It's maybe not as bad as it looks, but my gosh, the conversations and missing out on Saquon Barkley, letting great players walk, not that they had many, but letting some great players walk from the New York Giants organization. And then even the clip of, I think it was very early on in the episode last year of Joe Schoen calls Brian Daboll in or whatever. He's like, what do you think our biggest need is? And they're 3 days from free agency starting. I'm choosing to believe, I could be completely wrong, I'm choosing to believe that was set up to help the show tell the story, right? Surely you have an idea and a complete big board well before you've reached, because it's not like they were busy in the playoffs. They had all the time in the world to figure this thing out. But yeah, I mean, good luck. The 3-14 team, and they're bringing back, by the way, earlier in the video I mentioned this, but they're bringing back more starters than any other team in the NFL, and they were a 3-14 team. It seems like if you were 3-14, you would be the fewest. You wouldn't be bringing back 91% of your starting lineup. Yet the skill players, if I'm not mistaken, the only extra skill player or additional skill player from what they had last year is Scatbo. There's nobody else that they're bringing in there. So, I mean, good luck, Jackson Dart, I guess. Jameis Winston, whoever ends up being, but there's not a whole lot of adjustments here.
Yeah, I don't want to turn this into a Giants podcast, but it just felt like the perfect time for them to just blow things up. I mean, you're in position to get a new quarterback. You're coming off 2 disappointing seasons and especially basically hit rock bottom last year. I just don't understand why you would say here, this existing head coach and GM that have kind of failed the last couple of years, they made that one postseason push and they've kind of rode that wave ever since. But it was just felt like the perfect time to kind of break things off. There were plenty of promising head coaching candidates that were out there on the market. So it's not like they could say, oh, well, these guys weren't better than Brian Daboll. If you could have got a proven head coach, you could have got one of these top hot coaches that haven't had a head coaching job yet. There were plenty of options there. And they were just no, you know what? Let's roll with Brian Daboll and hand him a new rookie quarterback. Because now, if Jackson Dart does show some promise after Russell Wilson starts the first 8 to 10 games of the year, now you're going to convince yourself just keep Daboll around for another year because Jackson Dart looked pretty good in those 5 or 6 games. It's just such a bad situation. And luckily, a credit once again to Howie Roseman and the Eagles, where they're willing to, they'd almost cut a guy a year early than kind of hold on to a guy. And that was something that Howie Roseman's kind of learned because he's made those mistakes after the first Super Bowl win where he extended guys that he might not have should have. And they eventually ended up cutting them. But now they're quicker to kind of cut bait with a player or a coach if they realize things aren't working well. So just another notch for Philadelphia, another credit to Howie Roseman.
And see, that tells you where my mind is as well, because I didn't even mention Russell Wilson, because I'm just going and it's Jackson Dart. Like, if you want to figure out anything, you just
it should be
with your rookie quarterback.
That's a whole nother conversation.
Good luck. But yes, you did mention, though, and you're right, Howie Roseman, the Eagles have learned their lessons, and you can go back from Super Bowl of 2017, a Super Bowl appearance of 2023, and using a lot of that info for this post-Super Bowl victory this time, but the post-Super Bowl. And okay, you talk about even last year that Howie Roseman mentioned multiple times, we got to get younger. Like, we made them sick. We got to get younger. We got to get those guys reps, get those guys snaps. We definitely saw that. Nolan Smith, Jalyx Hunt. They were the Sack Summit, by the way, also in Las Vegas. Nolan Smith's made multiple appearances there. Jalyx Hunt, first time, I believe. I don't think was he there last year for the rookie? I don't think he was. I
don't believe so. I know Nolan Smith was there, though.
Yeah, so I think the first time. We could be wrong, but I think the first time for Jalyx. But to get tips, tricks, tools of the trade from guys like Max Crosby, Von Miller, Cam Jordan, and others alike, invaluable. So, and we've seen the same thing for offensive linemen attending Lane Johnson's O-line masterminds. But I'm just wondering here, because we both are probably some of the biggest Nolan. So maybe this is not a fair question to ask either of us, but we are both super big supporters of Nolan Smith and Jalyx Hunt. Are we putting too much pressure on them? Are we overhyping a little bit? Do we expect too much for them, like, coming into this next year, because they started showing something? I mean, especially Nolan Smith, but even Jalyx Hunt late in the year.
Well, like you said, you're the biggest Nolan Smith guy. I'm basically the biggest Jalyx Hunt guy. So this is not, like you said, the best question for either one of us. It's kind of D Wade throwing the lob to LeBron. But listen, I mean, the promise that they've showed, especially down the stretch last season, and I honestly feel like they aren't getting hyped up enough outside of Philadelphia. It feels like, I know Nolan Smith is gaining a little bit of traction. He was on the NFL Network morning show and made an appearance there, so maybe he's starting to get a little bit of the credit that he deserves. But I think Jalyx Hunt is really getting slept on. I know he only had a handful of sacks last season, but just the mentality, hearing the way these guys talk, seeing how they work, they're just not stopping. And it's clear that they're not satisfied. Even though they're young players, they won a Super Bowl early in their career. It's just not enough. They want to achieve more. Obviously Nolan Smith did a ton of winning at Georgia, so he's used to kind of coming off championships or going deep and having a ton of wins. So they know how to work and how to respond to, like Nick Sirianni talked about, like don't drink the perfume, and just kind of don't fall for the trap of success. Just like keep working, keep putting your head down. Brandon Graham kind of talked about that in the interview with you as well, just keeping their head down, doing that work in the basement that nobody else sees. And the Sack Summit is just another step in that direction. I know it's a little bit more publicized, but seeing a guy like Nolan Smith working with a guy like Robert Mathis, who's had the most forced fumbles in NFL history, and showing those guys how to use their spin move. I mean, can you imagine Nolan Smith with an unstoppable spin move, or Jalyx Hunt developing an unstoppable spin move? They already have the power and the speed to kind of win that way. So now they're just adding more moves to their pass rushing repertoire. I mean, that's just the next step for them. And like you said, working with greats like Max Crosby, Cam Jordan, Von Miller, who is still a free agent. I mean, who knows if he'll be reunited with Fangio? That's a whole another different conversation. But he's had obviously some off-field things to worry about that Philadelphia might not want to bring in. But either way, I mean, these are all proven players that are all Pro Bowl caliber players. If Nolan Smith and Jalyx Hunt are going to take that next step, working with these guys can only help them. So I'm really excited to see what they can do. And as I said, I think they're still being slept on a little bit too much.
I'm right there with you. Not a shock. So again, we kind of tee this up with the same sort of sentiment. But Dallas week 1, we're not going to go through the full schedule here, but Dallas week 1, Terrence Steele and Tyler Guyton. That's not a lot. That's so far. We could be proven wrong. They could take a great leap forward or a resurgence, because Steele has not really been great since the contract, but not incredible play. I think it's 14 sacks, if I'm not mistaken, over the last 2 years for Steele, and Tyler Guyton 6 or 7 sacks, a crazy amount of penalties, benched multiple. So yeah, we saw it last season, but like week one, there should be some really good opportunities. And by the way, great news for Nolan Smith because he did say that he expects to be 100% by training camp. So coming off the triceps injury, not a huge surprise. I think we anticipated he would be good to go with that type of injury, but he said it himself, expects to, should be fine. The other bit of news or, inklings that we get from players' Instagram stories and shares and things like that, but Nakobe Dean, he had shared himself getting a little workout in, and it's very limited. It's not a super long clip as people could see, but it's a move for a guy who's got a knee injury like that, going over hurdles, testing out some of the mobility, some of the work in the leg there. Again, very limited, but I mean, at this point where we're expecting for Nakobe Dean, I'd say positive.
Yeah, I mean, how could you not be encouraged by seeing that? I mean, I have two perfectly fine working knees, and I can't do what he's doing. So, I mean, obviously he's a different caliber of athlete in his own conversation, but the fact that he's like already, he told you when you met him at the NovaCare complex that he was hoping to kind of be out there at the start of training camp, maybe even before then. But I think the Eagles are going to try and play it as slow as possible. And as I've mentioned multiple times on this show before, I think Nakobe Dean's going to do everything possible to be out there as soon as possible. So it's going to be like, because he's heading into a contract here and he saw them draft Jihaad Campbell and sign Zack Baun to a contract extension, like he's going to want to get out there and be on the field. So I think it's going to be a little bit of a battle between him and the training staff to kind of like take the leash off of him and just let him go and let him play. But we'll see what happens. But like you said, this can only be a good sign at this point.
We'll take it. Absolutely will. And I would say last year, I don't know if necessarily, it kind of depends on who you would ask, but we had this conversation of, okay, Nakobe Dean, one of the players with a lot of pressure. I don't know if he was necessarily the consensus, but it did feel like he was very close to one of the most, or some of the most pressure for defensive players last year coming into the season, because you're like, we don't know, this is your chance. Like, if you're going to be the guy, because you're being, so, as people are saying, like, that's going to be the linebacker, and we're kind of wondering, like, the Devin White signing, Zack Baun building some hype there going into training camp, like, okay, it's now or never. You win the job, or who knows where this thing's going. And he delivered. To his credit, he delivered. Fantastic. He surprised. I mean, proved me wrong. I've said that many times. I'm very happy to say that. Didn't necessarily think that it would happen, but absolutely did. However, going into this season, a little bit different. But I'm curious, if you were to go through this squad and take a look at some of the guys on the defense, do you have a specific player, or maybe a couple players, if not one, but a specific player who you would pinpoint as like the most pressure on them coming into this season defensively?
So I was going back and forth between a couple players. I feel like the player that a lot of people will probably pinpoint would be Kelee Ringo, just because of the competition that's supposed to be there and just the expectations heading into year 3. People just want to see something from him. But I'm actually going to go to the guy that people aren't really talking about, nobody's really worried about, on the opposite side at the same position. That's Quinyon Mitchell. I think he had a really good rookie year. Obviously, him and Cooper DeJean both set the bar so incredibly high with how well they played in their first year in the NFL. That now I feel like, especially with Darius Slay no longer in the picture, that Quinyon Mitchell is going to get those top wide receiver matchups for the most part, and he is going to be relied upon as that CB1 in Philadelphia, and all that pressure is now on his shoulders. And do I think he's fully capable of being able to do so and shut these guys down? Absolutely. But at the same time, being that top cornerback on a championship competitor, there's going to be so much pressure on him, because now, especially with that question on the other side, whether it's Kelee Ringo or Dory Jackson, if they want to shift Cooper DeJean outside, Quinyon Mitchell's the guy that nobody's really concerned about now. So if he starts to struggle or gives up a touchdown here or there, and like, he needs to be the guy, the lockdown guy that everybody's expecting him to be. And if he's not, then that can only make things unravel as a whole in the secondary, because now if Kelee Ringo is not stepping up, or Dory Jackson, or like I said, if Cooper DeJean's out there, now you're just opening up a whole can of worms. So he really needs to be that lockdown guy for the whole defense to kind of function around him.
That's an interesting point that you bring up, and I think you're right on it. We've mentioned in the past, I think Cooper DeJean has been one of those that's thrown out there, obviously, because it's okay, he's the best slot corner in the NFL by many. The plays they made naturally in the Super Bowl, and you could go on and on and on. But it's like, okay, that's a lot. But there's so much hype on him now. It's like, where does he go from? He's been so good. It's like if he makes one play or a mistake early on, how quickly would it be like, oh my gosh, what's happened to Cooper DeJean? It's like, all the players make mistakes. Everyone gets burnt. We go back and think of the Carolina game when Adam Thielen put him kind of in a blender a little bit. Like, he's turning back the clock. It's like, okay, hey, I got you here. So there's instances of, they can learn from it, step away, take back the next week. But I think that that's a completely valid point, because we're just already, as you mentioned, we're just expecting that spot to be completely locked down. And, we'll call it what it was. Quinyon Mitchell was fantastic. Quinyon Mobe, there's a reason for that. But in the second matchup with Terry McLaurin, he even said in his post-game review, he's like, yep, caught him squatting a bit. Like, we've seen that on tape. That's something that we've noticed. Now, again, the next matchup in the NFC Championship game, all right, we're a little bit better. So, but it's kind of a back and forth on this one. So there's some, good habits, bad habits that happen through there, but Christian Parker able to kind of get them ready and caught up to speed. So I've got a lot of confidence for him, but I do agree with you as far as pressure. I would throw out maybe just another underrated type of player that has pressure, not as much in the sense of like, okay, he's one of the best on the defense, but for where we're at with a safety spot, I think Reed Blankenship has some pressure, and also like stay healthy. Like, we prayers, knock on wood, hopefully he's good, because he plays at times a little bit reckless with the physicality, and it just lays a hit or something. We're like, oh man, Reed Blankenship, he's been injured, he's missed some games. We're already with one safety spot where it's kind of like, I don't know what it's going to be. It's going to be Sidney Brown. It's going to be Tristan McCollum, Andrew Bakuba. Like, it could be it could be Andre Sam. It could be Lewis Seen. Some people throwing those out there. I'm not yet getting on that one, but it could be. We don't know. And so if we're a little bit uncertain for that one, Reed Blankenship's got to hold up, and he's got to hold serve, because if he gets injured or if he's struggling a little bit, that to me starts to be the back end of the defense, and maybe it's later on where Howie Roseman makes a move, even if they see that in training camp. But I am curious to see, like, can he hold up with a Reed Blankenship? So the exciting whites and exciting Mikes, they're hopefully live up to the hype for a reason, but we'll see.
It's funny that you brought up Reed Blankenship, because literally as we're going through all these questions that you planned, and originally Quinyon Mitchell was my choice, and as we're going through, I'm thinking to myself as we're recording, I'm like, damn, I could have also put Reed Blankenship, because like you said, it's almost a similar situation where like you have that one proven guy on one side, and then you're not sure who the starter is going to be at that second spot. So similar to the Kelee Ringo situation at CB2, Reed Blankenship's kind of dealing with that next to him, because like you said, who is it? Sidney Brown? Is it Drew Makuba? Is it one of these other guys? Do they bring in a Justin Simmons? So if they don't bring in an experienced veteran, Reed Blankenship's kind of being dependent on as that proven starter, that veteran in the back end. And if he struggles where, he slipped, he gave up a couple deep touchdowns, and now his confidence down, or he gets injured, like you mentioned, then that's obviously that's a big deal, because he has that pressure on him as being that starting safety that they can rely on. And now they're just figuring out who's next to him. But if he doesn't perform at the level that we expect, similar to Quinyon Mitchell, you can't really save these guys in the secondary, because if somebody gets past them and they slip up, that's it. There's no, especially at safety, but cornerback as well on the outside, if there's no safety help, they're going to get exposed if they're struggling. So both of those guys they've got a lot of pressure, and I feel like it's not really talked about too much.
We'll see. Keep it on it. They're both valid points. Let us know your thoughts too. I mean, if you got somebody else who's got the most pressure on the defense, let us know in the comments. I'm curious all the takes, and let us know why, of course. Don't just throw out the name. You can, but I legit be curious if you're going to throw out some names, especially different than what we're doing. Let us know. Reasons, thoughts on that. And same thing for the offense. If your player that has the most pressure is more on the offensive side, let us know that. Quickly here, your take on that side. Is there a particular player you'd say most pressure on offensively?
Well, you mentioned it earlier in the show. They're returning 10 of 11 starters on the offense, and it feels like Jalen Hurts has dealt with so much pressure. He's handled it well. Basically, everybody has handled it. I mean, Saquon Barkley, everybody was telling him how he wasn't going to be able to be the same player in Philadelphia. He was going to take a step back because Jalen Hurts wasn't that 4,000-yard passer, and we all saw that answered last season. So my player that has the most pressure is that 11th starter, that new starter, and that's Tyler Steen, who seems like he's going to be the guy at right guard. There hasn't really been much of a competition in OTAs. I don't expect there to be much of a competition in training camp, and he's played well when called upon for the most part, but he hasn't been that 17-game starter that was starting every year, and we saw Mekhi Becton step in last year and play so well. So But if Towerstein does struggle and he becomes kind of that weak link that teams can attack, I mean, the Eagles have the talent around them to kind of make up for it, where I don't know if it's going to be that big of a deal where it's going to be like a game-breaking target that they can just keep going at Towerstein. Like Jeff Stoutland and everybody's smart enough to kind of work around that and give him the help that he needs. But at the same time, if he does struggle, now are they going to try somebody else in there mid-season? Are they going to make these changes? And now you're kind of throwing everything off. So I think Towerstein has a lot of pressure, even though he should be prepared for it because he's got a couple of starts and he's been in Philadelphia now going into his third year. I think he has a lot of pressure to kind of be that fifth starting offensive line and fill those shoes that were open now that Mekhi Becton left.
Yeah, not completely new to him, as you say. He's got the experience, but there's understandably when you go across the line and it's Jordan Mailata, Landon Dickerson, Cam Jurgens. Okay, Tyler Steen can't hit, and then Lane Johnson. So, but he can't. Maybe he does. And there's a lot of belief in him, as a lot of people have had. Certainly, Jeff Stoutland's sung his praises multiple times when talking about Tyler Steen. So, we trust Stout. Real quickly, I would also just say, or I would add for mine to be different, but I would say Dallas Goedert, and for similar-ish reasons of Reed Blankenship, but a little bit more so on the injury side, because we've just seen, and we've noticed this many, many times, but when Dallas Goedert gets injured, this Eagles offense, understandably so, is very different. And Grant Calcaterra, we love him to death. He can make some plays. The blocking has not been great. Maybe they offset that if it's a Kylan Granson. He had some good numbers. He's been an underrated blocker. If he ends up being the guy, maybe a Harrison Bryant. But I'm just saying, it's sometimes, and Grant Calcaterra is maybe a little bit of a difference because Jalen was willing to throw his way. But even then, it's kind of hit or miss sometimes. Like if Dallas Goedert's there, okay, we'll throw to the tight end. Some. But if Goedert's injured, it's sometimes you get a wide open guy, and it's like, nah, I'm not looking that way. That's not going to go. The ball's not being thrown there. So Dallas Goedert, I don't know how this is possible because I know it's not you're not trying to get injured, but stay healthy, be healthy. We wish you well because, yeah, it's a different game with the blocking and pass-catching ability that Goedert presents.
Yeah, I mean, once Grant Calcaterra was in there and Jahan Dotson was in there, it's just like those are two guys that Jalen Hurts basically never going to throw to. So opposing defenses kind of just like not even really worry about those guys because of how little they were targeted. I mean, Grant Calcaterra had a couple catches. Jahan Dotson obviously had a couple in the Super Bowl and the biggest moment, so that kind of erases everything before that. But at the same time, like you said, it's just Dallas Goedert. It feels like the one guarantee with him every season is he's going to miss like at least 3 or 4 games, right? It's been that way, especially like essentially since his rookie season. So it would be great if he signed this 1-year deal to return, took less money, and all of a sudden he doesn't miss a single game. That would be awesome to see because not only would it be great for the Eagles, but it would be great for Dallas Goedert heading into free agency and potentially getting a bigger deal elsewhere, and that would result in a compensatory pick for the Eagles. So it's just a win-win for everybody. So hopefully that does happen. But like you said, just history doesn't like bode too well for him as far as an injury standpoint.
We will see. Hopefully so. It'd be great to have the one season with, play all 17 games, stay healthy, play through the playoffs, win the Super Bowl, see what happens, if he's going to stay around with the Eagles. But it'll be interesting. Really quickly here, as we were talking about too, for next week is going to be the NFL Top 100 list. And I'm sure we're going to disagree with a lot of stuff. I'm sure everyone will. It's bound to be inaccurate according to many different fan bases, as these things normally are. But figured we would quickly touch on this because, we look at last year. There were 5 Eagles that were on the top 100 last year. A little bit disrespected, I think, depending on where those positions were then versus now or where we could expect them. But thoughts on maybe how that would change or kind of as we predict some names, and feel free in the comments also to let us know who you think your top 100 or how many Eagles would make it and which one's in the top 100.
So I remember last season, it felt like everybody was mad that Jordan Mailata and Jalen Carter didn't make the list, right? I felt like those were the biggest. People were like, how do you not put Jalen Carter unless he was a beast, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, It feels like now going into this year, those are 2 guys that are definitely going to be on the list. I would be shocked if they weren't, probably even in the top 50, just off kind of the hype around them. Obviously, the Eagles winning kind of puts a bigger spotlight on everything. But one thing to note is, we talked about it before coming on the show, but the voting doesn't take place until the middle of the season, around like Thanksgiving or the first week of December. So usually I think it was Thanksgiving to New Year's is around the range that the players usually vote. So
Mhm.
playoff runs, things that happens in the playoffs don't usually matter. And a player could have submitted his thing around Thanksgiving, and obviously some of the Eagles players started really playing at a much higher level after that. So there might be some names that don't make the list, but that's probably because of when the voting takes place. I don't think it makes sense. I feel like they should just wait, especially if it's not coming out until basically July. Why not just wait until the entire season is over? But it might be too hard to get in touch with the players. It feels like something
That's
very
true.
simple
Like,
that they
you
can
want me
just
to
do on their
take
phone.
homework
Like,
home.
I don't
Like,
think
nah,
you have
forget
to
it.
send this physical list to the headquarters of each team and have like, why can't you just be a survey that they do on their phone, 1, 2, 3, while they're sitting on the toilet bowl or something like that? But hey, I mean
Seems
that's
like
not
you
the way they
could.
did it. So last season, Jalen Hurts was 15th overall, AJ Brown was 21st overall, Lane Johnson was 41st overall, Saquon Barkley was 86th overall, and Devonta Smith was 90th overall. So I think from those names, I think Devonta Smith might not make it. His stats are a little bit worse than last season. I think maybe players kind of forget about him and he might not make the list. I think AJ Brown, I know his stats took a little bit of a step backward, but he's still such a dominant receiver that he'll be on the list. So I think 4 out of those 5 from last year. Obviously Saquon Barkley, based on how he played, he's probably going to be top 5, top 10 overall on the
My
list.
gosh.
And then
Crazy
as far
change
as
from
yeah,
86 to 3, 4, 5, somewhere around there, probably. Yeah.
exactly. And especially if they're giving out those lists to start voting around Thanksgiving. Last year, right around Thanksgiving, is when he ran for 255 yards or whatever it was against the Rams. So that's going to be right in the front of everybody's head that's voting around that time. So Saquon Barkley will definitely be jumping around 70 to 80 spots this year would be my prediction. But
Mm-hmm.
as far as the other players that didn't make it last year, I think, like I said, Jordan Mailata and Jalen Carter should make it. Zach Baun should definitely make it. And one of like my sleeper picks, this might be ruined by how late they vote, but I think Cooper DeJean kind of stands out, especially if players remember that hit on Derrick Henry and kind of how much he helped change Philadelphia's defense. I think he could kind of sneak in and be a player that makes it in like that 80 or 90 range.
There we go. I like it. That'd be assuming. I mean, if Smitty doesn't make it, but you get the other 4, like 8 players instead of the 5. So that's not too bad. If you get 8 of the top 100, I would take that. So yeah. We'll see. We'll probably know. In all honesty, we'll probably know very quickly if Smitty, because they release him in stages. So it'd be like the top or like 100 to 81 or something like that. So they slowly release those. So if we don't see Smitty fairly quickly, then it's probably same deal. I would be surprised if it's like, oh, Smitty's at 60, something like that. It's probably, if he's going to be in there, about the same range. But we'll see. You never know. As I mentioned, let us know in the chat what you think. Any other additions that you would have for the top 100. Speaking of players making names and in the top 100 there, you have a new card in the background of Brian Dawkins, I believe.
Yes, I did.
It's a pretty legit card. Which is
this is one of my grails that I've been looking for a very long time.
Look at that.
It's a Brian Dawkins 1996 rookie card, PSA 10, so the highest grade possible. So in the number 24 jersey that he started his career with, so that's pretty cool too. So
that's pretty authentic there. And was that the one you said Fanatics Fest, right? Or
yes.
Just,
so
okay,
I picked up that and a couple other cards at Fanatics Fest thanks to trading and whatnot. So I got I don't know if you want me to show the other ones or not, but got
might as well.
Howie Roseman and Nick Sirianni on the card together.
Yeah, that's rare.
That's numbered to 25. There's only 25 of those. And something else that's numbered to 25 is this Jalen Carter autograph rookie patch card.
Come on.
So, yeah, very, very excited about those. And just an awesome event overall. I mean, obviously I was there to write for the site. I ended up putting out 5 articles covering basically any Eagles angle that I could possibly get, because on Sunday there was the Champs Are Here panel, which included Cooper DeJean, Nick Foles, Brian Dawkins, Brendan Graham, and Dawn Staley, hosted by Ryan Clark. So that was great, but obviously there were 2 days before that where there really wasn't too much like Eagles-wise going on. But Bryce Young had a comment about returning home to Pennsylvania and how his family and friends didn't have the most welcoming reaction to him after the game, which was funny. I wrote about that if you want to check it out at thephillyspecialshow.com. Then on Saturday, Jaden Daniels had talked about the Eagles a little bit, and I wrote an article about that as well. And then obviously Sunday was kind of the Eagles day, because there was that panel that I mentioned, and then Brandon Graham also appeared on the podcast where he first kind of brought up how he wanted to work for the team and dove a little bit deeper. And then obviously Josh had the great exclusive interview with him where he kind of dove into really what he would want to do, his specific role with the team. And I wrote about that for the site as well. And you should definitely watch the last video with that interview as well. So it was just an awesome event overall. I would definitely recommend anybody that has either children that are interested in sports, or if you're interested in sports as yourself, or sports cards. It literally just captures everything possible. And you're kind of just walking around, and it reminds me of like playing like a Pokemon game, but for sports fans, because you're just walking around the Javits Center and you're just walking among everybody else, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, that's John Cena. Oh, that's Tom Brady. Oh, that's Speed, the streamer. Oh, that's this. It's just like they're just walking among everybody else. I mean, granted, they usually have a couple of security guards with them, but there are also some guys like Tyrone Tracy, the Giants running back. He had autograph and a photo session there, and then afterwards he was just taking in the event like everybody else. No security, no nothing, just walking around, people taking pictures. I mean, it's really such a cool event, and I think they had 70,000 people attend last year, which was the first year of the event, over the 3 days. And I believe this year they announced 125,000 people over the 3 days. So there are talks of expanding it and maybe having the fourth day, like making it a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday event, something like that. But either way, like I said, if you're a sports fan, even if you're in PA or New York, or if you want to fly in, it's just such a great event. Even if you go for one day, if you can get all 3 or 4 days, that'd be great too. But it's just such a cool event because, like I said, they have the panels and the podcast, like these scheduled shows that you could see these players and entertainers and rappers, whoever you want to think. And then there's all these other activations where they have an NHL one where you're shooting hockey pucks into a dryer and washer machine, or they have like a football where you can, the whole NFL thing where you can run your 40-yard dash and do these like reaction tests. I know everybody sees the things where the sticks are falling and you got to kind of test your reaction and grab them. They had that. They had a whole F1 display this year with a full-blown F1 car with a reaction test there. And I feel like that was only the second year, so I can imagine what it's going to look like in the third year. So it was great to cover it from an Eagles perspective, and I had a ton of content, like I said, from that, but just a really cool event overall.
That's awesome. Yes, and it was fantastic content, as you're mentioning. And like Anthony also referenced, you go to thephillyspecialshow.com, or you can follow Anthony at DiBona NFL. Content nonstop. Great articles, great coverage, everything else. But it looked like a blast. And, it's always great whenever the faces of next year's Super Bowl are Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley. So
that tweet blew up, man. I was
now.
not expecting that. It was just, that was incredible.
That was pretty legit. So, well, cool. Well, we appreciate it as always. Let us know, guys. Again, comment if you're looking to potentially win. We talk about giveaways and everything else craziness, but signed BG jersey from the Super Bowl jersey of BG that's been signed. Just comment on the video. Make sure to like, subscribe as always. We appreciate you guys. Until next time, go Birds.